I don't know if you know this, Tony, on our podcast, we do these cycle critiques. Are you down to do a few with us?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen as technologically inept as I am. Okay, here we go. So maybe we'll start with this one. So here we go. So Dan Pack, who's a great subscriber, his name is Hip Azen on it. He says it's his first cycle. He wants to do HCG thrice a week, 300 up to 500 milligrams to get a good effect. He wants higher than 800 nanograms per deciliter. So he's going to rely on HCG for his testosterone. He's going to use 5 to 6 units of growth hormone two times a day for 10 to 12 weeks. And so he's interesting. So he's using HCG less and probably 350 milligrams a week of methanolone. What is that? Do you guys know what that is?
No.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, that's D-ball. Oh, wait, Primobolan.
Oh, is it Primo? Okay. Yeah. And then he says the HCH is generic. I hope he's using Boston's generic, that one on the forum, because that one is great. And 5 milliliters of cerebrolysin, 5 times a week. Okay. What do you guys think of this as a first cycle? So basically, he's using that's his name.
Oh, okay. I was like, what?
So is this all at the same time? I mean, he's trying to use the HCG while he's using the Primobolan.
Yeah, the reason why is in my
like testosterone foundation. That's
exactly
instead of taking testosterone.
Exactly. Yeah. I think this is
when he puts 300 up to 500 mg. Does he mean IU?
He means IU. Yeah.
Yeah, IU for sure.
No, I don't think 300 to 500 is going to get him to 800 nanograms per deciliter, but I made a video recently, it's not out yet, about how to titrate up your HCG with blood tests to get it to a level that you want. Usually people will need like 1,000 units or so. By the way, you could measure it in milligrams.
Okay, I have a really good anecdotal report. I had a friend that was taking 500 units of HCG twice per week because his testicles were not producing testosterone. So the doctor actually gave him 500. I think it was 500. Maybe it was 500 every 5 days. I'd have to look back. But anyways, the point is the dosage was low, and that was able to get him from no testosterone up to normal testosterone or a little bit enhanced testosterone range, because like his body wasn't producing luteinizing hormone type thing, so he was substituting it with the HCG. So I think that gives us sort of a normal baseline, and he's only looking for normal testosterone, but he's also taking Primo, which is also suppressive.
Yes.
So how he's, counteracting that.
So I've seen, like, just to explain how potent HCG can be, I've seen people, I've had clients that used 1,500 IU every other day and got their nanograms per deciliter to 1,500. So it can go really high. So you may be right there. I like this Hip Azen.
I want 2,500 IU every other day for pregnancy protocol.
Yeah, that's the half, by the way, Boston. That's the half the max dose in studies. Some use 5,000 every other day.
Well, no, my normal protocol is 5,000 every other day when I'm running a cycle. But since I'm only doing a little bit of TRT, I'm just doing 2,500.
I think this is cool. I would add MK677 so you get the full spectrum of growth hormone production, because you're replacing your growth hormone. You're going to turn off your growth hormone, and I assume he's using the cerebrolysin for cognitive effects. But that sounds fun.
So with the HCG, he's kind of bypassing the axis. So actually, it's not going to matter so much that he's suppressing with the Primobolan. But also, why not take more testosterone boosters, like natural testosterone boosters and thing as well? And then also a little bit of Clomid can help maintain testosterone levels. Like I always believed that, and I always took it while I was on cycle early on, just small, short bursts, because it also has side effects that accumulate.
Yeah.
So that's something else to consider as a testosterone.
Tony, don't you think this guy would get a lot better results if he didn't use HCG and used like 250 mg of testosterone in replace of it?
Yeah, it's kind of like why. It's like you're already injecting Primo, which is a lot of oil, right? He's going to inject 3.5 cc's of Primo per week to get 350 milligrams. It's like, why not just make it 4 cc and add another 0.5 cc of testosterone, giving you 125 milligrams per week, which is a adequate TRT foundation for this.
Yeah, I'd rather do that.
So the one argument, I think, two arguments. So one, Tony, you mentioned a great point, which is that he needs to control estradiol if he wants to get the most out of the HCG. Estradiol is a big negative feedback indicator to the brain. So you would use Clomid or an AI, something like a exemestane. And the second thing is, to be honest, I personally feel like the 350 milligrams of Primo is too low. Not too low, but I would personally use something a bit higher unless it wasn't a cycle. Like if you were going long term, maybe you'd start at low dose, slowly titrate up. But I know that people like to use low doses recently. So I think we commented on that one. What does Kamote mean? Kamote Kid says 500 milligrams of Test E per week, year round, paired with a second compound at 250 milligrams per week, either equipoise or an NPP for 4 months on and off. He would prefer to use Primo at 500 milligrams per week year round, but it's not available. Oh, by the way, that's another point about the last one. One of the advantages of Primo, maybe for athletes, is they store less water, and Primo causes more erythropoiesis than testosterone. So I'm assuming maybe the last guy was some kind of athlete or something like that. But anyway, he says he wants to use Primo instead, but it's not available. That's not true. You should go to Boston's forum. Anyone that's not subscribed to Boston's forum, really, I wish I had that forum years ago. You can solve a lot of your problems. But adjusted according...
There's pharmaceutical grade Primo on there too. He ships worldwide.
Yeah, but don't you think this cycle is basically Dante's cycles for pennies? That's what that was. It's test with NPP, and you would switch off NPP and Boldenone.
Is that what Dante's
dog crap? Yeah, Dante. That's what his thing was. That's the original article that made him quite well known.
It's funny, Tony. Me and you were looking at these cycles like, what the fuck? We're used to seeing cycles that are like 10 times the amount of this.
I know.
Yeah, and it's also really hard to know, like, what does he look like? What's his body weight? What's his experience? What's his goal? What is his risk tolerance? Why isn't he considering, like, why when I say the anabolic matrix, like other pathways to get to that goal? I always like lower testosterone dosages because I don't like having to use anything to mitigate the estrogen. And so if he can use 500 milligrams of test and he's got no estrogen side effects, okay, then there's an argument for that. But most people around 300 milligrams, I think over 300 milligrams, they start, a lot of people start having some kind of estrogen side effects. So that's why I usually keep a lower foundation of 300 milligrams of test, and then I add more other compounds on top of that. So if he still wants to do the same amount of milligrams, I like 300 milligrams of test, and then 400 milligrams of EQ or 400 milligrams of NPP, for example. And I like the idea of rotating between them so side effects don't accumulate for any one of them for too long.
Wait, Broderick Chavez, what? Boston?
It sounds like a Broderick Chavez cycle.
Yeah, we don't do that here. But can I comment on something? So, Tony, about the estrogen with the test, that becomes a particular problem when you add that NPP there, because you get the prolactin, severe prolactin effects when you have that higher estrogen. For people that don't know, estrogen and progesterone both cause increases in prolactin. So when you have that agonism with the NPP we think the progesterone receptor, it should cause that.
And once you get like that type of gyno from excess estrogen combined with a 19 nor like NPP or tren, like that's the worst type of gyno. It's harder to get rid of. If you have just estrogen gyno, it's easy to get rid of.
Boston used to lactate distances, like he would squirt.
Yeah, I used to shoot.
Oh, okay. I think that's basically a request to see how. Oh, look at, by the way. More shredded now, huh?
Oh yeah, you are. Wow, you're very fit.
All right, let's see. I don't know. I always have to check. Can I lactate right now on camera? Can you see that?
You got some out. Oh wow.
I got it.
That was how much I had. I never had what Boston had, but
yeah.
Tony, did you ever get your glands removed?
No, but I want to because Joe Aesthetics just got it done here. I don't know what he paid for it. Doesn't matter. It's going to be
cheap as fuck in Thailand.
And he got it, and he's like, yeah, this is just a 2-week recovery. Like 2 weeks, 2-week recovery. Amazing.
Yeah, mine was 4 weeks, but I ended up training like the week after, and I pulled my stitches out like an idiot.
Mine was, I had the drains in for 4 weeks. It was horrific, but it was my mistake. Wow. It was my mistake. I had the damn
3 different extremes.
Oh my God. I know it was a great surgery. But Tony, if you want to do it, the best guy is in Orange County. He's awesome. I'll give you I forgot his name right now. He's really good, but I made mistakes and I was messing around. I kept the drains in and I didn't work out for 6 weeks. So I became fat. I was ordering food, became fat, had the drain. It was a horrible experience. But anyway, okay, we'll move past this one. Armesh Singh always comments on our page. Singh means lion in Indian. It's cool in Punjabi. He says 200 milligrams test E. By the way, something you commented on, Tony. For the audience to know, we always want to know your background, your goals, your previous cycles, but sometimes people don't know that we want to know that, so they don't include it. So he said 200 milligrams test E, 40 milligrams turinabol or anavar with ezetimibe and lots of fish oil for 8 weeks. He doesn't like high tests because it makes him lethargic and causes insomnia. The insomnia comes from androgen receptor activation. So the more androgenic something is, the more insomnia you could get. It's not from the estrogen. He says, yeah, go ahead.
This is really similar to my first cycle, my first steroid cycle for my first physique competition when I was 30 years old, 9 years ago. That was the first time physique showed up on the scene, right? I was one of the first people to compete in for one of the first physique competitions. And I started out with T-ball. I told myself, I'm just going to take T-ball. I think it was around 40 milligrams. I think 50 sounds more like what I was doing, 50 milligrams of T-ball. And then it was a week later, I decided, you know what, this is stupid. I should have a testosterone foundation. I know this. And now finally, okay, now I broke through. I actually took a steroid. Now I might as well take it to the next level and inject it, right? The natural progression. The gateway drug is oral steroids for sure. And I think I added in roughly something like 200 milligrams of test. This is like my first cycle exactly. I didn't use, I was taking fish oil at the time. I wasn't using ezetimibe. But actually, I have that right. Look I have this right here in front of me because this is one that I think you told me to get one time. Oh, God,
yeah, so there it is. And by the way, Tony, you know what's great about that? It also lowers systemic inflammation. Could be helpful for the COVID responses also.
Okay, I'll take it today.
Tony, what was your first physique show?
What was it?
Where at? Because I was at
Sacramento.
Okay, because I competed in the very first show ever that had physique. It was the NPC Fresno, and it was in 2012.
Oh. Wow. So I wasn't the first competition, but I was the first one of the first competitions that ever came to Sacramento.
Was it in 2012?
What is that? Yeah, 9 years ago. Exactly. I was 30 years old. Yeah, 2012.
Yep, that's when it came out.
What's Fresno like? I've never been there, but I only hear
it's
bad
kind
things.
of boring, man. There's like nothing there, huh?
It's boring. It's Mexican style, which I love Mexican style. But yeah, it's boring.
Yeah, they have the Fresno Bulldogs there. So I wanted to comment on this. So the only thing I see as a disadvantage here is what I see the advantage of turinabol, or I've never used turinabol, or anavar, basically any steroid that doesn't have an ester. The advantage is you can use it infrequently so your body doesn't adapt to it. So what I would love to do personally is to use something sustainable, maybe like HCG or something like that, and use anavar, say 3 times a week, or even better, use turinabol once, use anavar once, and then use turinabol once every other day, maybe on the important workout days. That way your body doesn't adapt to it and you don't have to use high doses. The other thing I would mention is you can take these things sublingually, maybe reducing the total dose you need and the toxicity to the liver. You guys have any other comments?
Leo, what do you think would happen if somebody put them up their ass? Would they absorb?
Yeah, faster. But
wow.
Boston's always curious about these things after you heard about it the first time.
I would like to take some halo testing that way then.
Oh, you know my buddy snorts halo testing, right?
No.
Yeah, I never told you that?
No.
In the back of the gym, there's halo lines on max effort days. Yeah, you can go like, hey, you want to go do a line of halo? Like, no, I don't want to do a line of halo.
You really hit him? Like, does he go crazy?
Oh yeah, and then he takes those salts and he goes crazy, bro.
Oh shit, the ammonia salts. Yeah,
exactly. But the halo testing is way more effective. When he goes on arm wrestling days or like when he competes, he's blue from that starting day. Anyway, so Max the Butcher says, first time trying no test as I've started to follow some of Tyen's protocols, which Tony Huge, by the way, originally popularized, with food with great results. So thought would try a Nandrolone-based cycle. The thing is, I notice he has a high NPP, but then he has EQ. You know, this has estrogenic effects and psychological effects, little psychological effects, but I think that it would defeat sort of the calmness that you get from the NPP psychologically. And then I'm curious why this is cool. I like CJC with DAC. Very, very, very interesting drug. But why does he have this here? Is he recovering from something? Because the concern is BPC really upregulates what's called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. So it can upregulate angiogenesis, the birth of new blood vessels in the body. That's the worst part of growth hormone for cancers. It's that angiogenesis. So unless you're healing from a wound, I would be careful with using this long term, you know? You guys have any other comments? I mean, Bostin, you must have a...
Okay. So this is I would never recommend this to anyone. This is the worst thing I've ever seen, but Leo, I want you to ask this guy seriously after. Be like, I personally am curious. I want to know this. Ask him after he runs his cycle how he liked it. I'm actually curious.
Yeah, it's very curious. What do you think, Tony?
I'd be really curious also. I mean, if he hasn't done a DECA only cycle before, then do a DECA only cycle.
Exactly.
So you know what's happening. If you're gonna add other compounds in, then it's like, why not just go back to a testosterone-based cycle?
Especially something estrogenic that has it's weirdly increases estrone in the body and seems maybe through that, or maybe the decrease in estradiol, I don't know, but EQ causes anxiety in some people.
Yeah, so these are my first impressions, but maybe, well, it says he started following some of Tyan's protocols. So if Tyan actually put this out as a protocol, then I'd say, okay, there must be some reason. They must work together well. But if it's trying to take Tyan's protocol of just taking DECA or NPP, and then you're adding something else, now you've defeated the entire purpose.
I think so too. I don't think Tyan recommends this. I think he usually does only Nandrolone, right? Yeah. There are sometimes he adds other things to it too, but there's a thought process of very detailed analysis behind it. Now you don't just willy-nilly add something to it. Because
I've yet to see anyone that guy trains that looks good though.
Yeah, but they're not like professionals. They do it you know why they do it, Bostin? It's mainly people that are afraid of hair loss. So apparently Nandrolone, unless you're using finasteride or dutasteride, when 5-alpha reductase converts it to another, like 5-alpha reductase is what makes DHT around your hair, it converts it to a less androgenic compound. So that's why they use DECA by itself.
Isn't he preaching those cycles to bodybuilders?
I don't think are they competitive, Tony?
No, I mean, it's not. That's not originally what it was.
That's not the goal, yeah.
Bodybuilders, but I'll say the reason for it is also simplicity. So, because remember, I was the one who popularized the DECA only cycle. It wasn't my idea. It's just that Tyan came up with it, and I thought it was so interesting. It deserved attention, and I had the influence to bring it attention back then. So, at the time, I thought this was the most ridiculous thing ever. But then, when we got to really talking about it, we thought this is a really low maintenance way for people to use gear. If they use only DECA, they don't need to mitigate estrogen. They don't need any other ancillaries. The side effects are low. They can run it long term. Okay, I understand. It's simple. With testosterone, the problem is as you increase the dosage, which everybody increases the dosage, you're going to have to mitigate a lot of the side effects. You got to deal with increased DHT and estrogen, and you got to take ancillaries. And with the DECA only cycle, the argument is you don't need to worry about so many other compounds and complexity.
How is the sex drive and libido on that?
They say it's good.
Yeah, it's supposed to be okay with DECA only. It's the risk is when you add something else in. Also, that's why.
Particularly estrogen, right? Something that converts to estrogen or has estrogenic effects, right? Yeah, but Tony, I wanted to mention, we should mention that, I'm really sad that your originally huge channel is no longer there. I mean, I gotta say, I'm really honored to be both with you and Bostin in a podcast. You two were my favorite channels that I used to watch before. I mean, Bostin didn't really have a channel, but he was all over the place.
I would do random shit all the time.
Yeah, he just had a few videos and then the thing got shut. But you guys were my favorite. And the reason is because I could always tell that you guys were very honest people and direct. Sometimes people mistake charisma for dishonesty. You're a very direct person, and that's why you get a lot of flack, because you tell the real things about your lifestyle and everything like that. Anyway, moving to this one, he gave us more information. He said he's only been bodybuilding for 2 years, minus COVID shutdowns, but he has a lot of resistance training as in wrestling and MMA. So he wants to do Test E, Primo E. What is Trestolone, by the way? I've never used this thing.
It's men. That's
men.
Strong.
Oh, we have the Ment expert on. Okay, so this would be interesting. So he's using 400 of test, 500 of Primo, 150 of Ment for 16 weeks, possibly with 3 to 4 units of growth hormone. Oh, I didn't mention in the other one, the guy that was using growth hormone twice a day. You're going to make yourself insulin resistant twice a day, but you may cause more fat loss if you're not eating carbohydrates and becoming more and more insulin resistant. So I would rather inject it once before bed personally. But anyway, so he says, and metformin, which metformin, I mean, anyway, he's a high aromatizer with tests, but tolerates Trestolone well, while being anabolic. And he says at 5 to 10 milligrams a day of ACE, I feel a little bit more estrogenic, but nothing major to need an AI. What is ACE?
Is he talking about ACE inhibitor?
I don't think so. No. He says first experience with Primo, trying to bulk from 200 to 220. What do you think about this combination of, let's just say, Primo and Ment and Test E, Tony? You're the expert. I've never used Ment.
Yeah, well, okay, so Ment is so much more powerful than Test. If there's a receptor and these compounds are competing, Ment is going to get it 100% of the time, and Test is just going to get kicked off the receptor and converted to estrogen. So you got to be careful when you're combining testosterone and Ment, because some of that testosterone may just end up to be converted to estrogen, and you're going to have estrogen side effects. And the Ment, the type of estrogen that Ment converts to, is a very powerful, insanely powerful estrogen. I mean, we're talking you can get gyno in 24 hours type powerful estrogen.
Oh, interesting.
So I worry he's a high aromatizer, and but he tolerates Trestolone well, which is amazing. But I worry he's going to have some serious estrogen conversion from the combination of two. As far as the Primo dosage, I think that's pretty normal. I think that's what most people run of Primo, and that's fine. And on top of it, all of these things competing for the same receptor, of course. And yeah, it's not exactly how receptors work. Not even an expert on it.
No, that is how they work.
Some kind of spillover effect too.
Very coherent. Very coherent.
Using very powerful compounds with very weak compounds. Those weak compounds are just going to turn into side effects over a certain threshold. But it depends on where that threshold is. This is where it comes in. Like, how much muscle does he have? Tony,
I got to tell you something interesting. After we get off the call, I'm going to send you a website that I discovered recently. It's an algorithm that you can put in certain molecules, and it estimates which receptors it may bind to in the body. And you'd be shocked. Like, I put in, for example, Superdrol, Anadrol, Dianabol, and they are wildly different, just as I always suspected. These things are having access to all kinds of receptors in the body, like the ROR receptors that Accutane, vitamin E work around, all kinds of receptors. So, Ment may be doing all kinds of things, but don't you think that Ment and Primo may work well together, with Primo having this like anti-estrogenic effect?
Yeah, yes. And I mean, if I was going to use it for that purpose, I'd use Masterone. But Primo is really good for nitrogen retention, and people can't eat enough on Trestolone. I mean, when you're so anabolic on Ment, the limiting factor, it's one of these compounds where the limiting factor becomes your diet. And so Primo allows you to be a little bit more flexible with your diet with better nitrogen retention also. So that's why there's also an additional benefit to combining them.
Leo, the roundest I was bloated too. I was on like 1.5 grams or 2 grams of testosterone with like 100 milligrams of Ment every other day. I was so bloated. I think I was using letrozole as an anti-estrogen. I mean, I got my glands removed, so I don't even got to worry about it, but I got up to like 280.
Holy crap. That's fascinating. Okay, we'll move to the next one.
Oh, but Leo, what's 5 to 10 milligrams of ACE?
I have no idea what he's saying. I think he's trying to talk about an aromatase inhibitor.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know what he's saying.
When I first experimented with Ment, I did 100 milligrams per day for 30 days, and I put on 30 pounds.
By itself?
Yeah, it was by itself. Yeah.
No testosterone.
No test. You don't.
How did you feel?
Amazing.
That's all you took. That's just all you took. That's it.
I felt absolutely amazing, but the gyno was a problem.
Only 700 milligrams of anabolics a week.
Yeah.
Wow.
But have you guys
too high of a dosage? I'm not recommending that. It's just that I wanted to see what this compound does to my blood work and how it affects my body. And this is like, someone's got to do the experiment, and I was willing to take the risk.
Tony, did you ever use DHB, the 5-alpha reductase version of, or reduced version of equipoise?
Right. No, but that's what Coach Trevor always wanted me to use. And yeah,
it's an interesting drug.
Yeah.
I've tried it a couple of times just to experiment, literally like maybe 3 times or 4 times now. But it's very interesting. Doesn't seem to have many psychological effects, but seems quite androgenic. With that said, I've heard of a lot of people having kidney issues using it, I think because of the solvents. Boston and I have a suspicion that some of these injectables with high solvents could be the reason that his kidneys quickly got inflamed.
Oh, yeah, I think so too, because it's like if you take 1 cc of a steroid with a certain amount of benzoate or potentially oxidized fats or whatever else could be in it, it's not a big deal. People on TRT never have to worry about solvents, right? But bodybuilders, you inject 10 cc's a week of something, that's a lot of benzoate, that's a lot of benzyl alcohol. And if there's any other contaminants in it, that's a lot of things. All of these have to get filtered through the liver or the kidneys. Exactly. It's going to definitely put stress on them.
So in 2018, I got my kidney creatinine, it was like 0.90. And the worst smelling stuff I've ever put in my body ever was DHB base. And it hurt so bad. This stuff was so painful, DHB base. And I really do think that my creatinine starting to rise a little bit after experimenting with so many of compounds that are made in glucol.
To be honest, I've become a little suspicious about this. I'm a hypochondriac, and I've been using So everybody always asks what I've been using since I've been working out. I'm not doing this intentionally. It's just I knew this would happen. When I go work out again, if you don't work out with androgens and you used to, it's so tempting. So I've been trying to bypass the liver, taking like injectable orals, and I've been suspicious recently. I don't know if I have a lower back pump or I have I'm a hypochondriac, so I think I'm feeling my kidneys. So I'm going in for a kidney ultrasound, by the way, next week to Cedars-Sinai.
Which lab are you using?
I'm not using a lab. I'm going to the Cedars-Sinai to do the ultrasound.
No. For the injectable orals.
I was using our guy, but you know what happened.
Okay, yeah. He's good. His is good.
But now probably Juice Pal.
So I have another comment about the chemicals in gear. So you mentioned glycol, right? So ethyl oleate is another solvent, but also a carrier. And so when you're manufacturing this stuff, this is a laboratory right behind me, right? So I've spent a lot of time in underground laboratories. I'm not an expert manufacturer myself. I usually work with people who are, because it's a lot to know. But I've seen, testosterone enanthate mixes very easily. And a lot of these, it's almost like part of the reason why the steroids that are so popular is because they're easier to make and they're cheaper, right? But you actually have other compounds like DHB that may be much better, but maybe they're harder to work with, they're harder to manufacture. What happens with the more exotic compounds is you got to be more creative in how you dissolve them and how you prevent them from crystallizing and a number of other things. And you start, and the easy way to do it, the easy way to underground manufacture is put more chemicals. You see, that's a chemical cabinet back there. I can make anything dissolve with those chemicals, but it can be highly toxic. So unless your underground lab actually cares about your health and is trying to minimize toxic chemicals, I've seen gear labels where it says it's just benzoate and benzyl alcohol, but I actually know that they were using some other solvents that are toxic to make it dissolve. Because what happens is customers freak out when they see crystallization in a vial, which is not that big of a deal. I'd much rather have my gear crystallize 10% and just avoid injecting those crystals than have it be full of chemicals that prevents it from crystallization. It's the same thing as organic food. Do you want to buy a food that lasts forever, that's like plastic, it's not real? Or do you want to buy food that goes bad in a couple days because it's natural? I mean, it's almost like gear is the same way. The less solvent you use and the healthier solvents you use, the more likely it is going to crash. But everybody's focused on the crash instead of what toxic chemicals could be in the compound.
I've had to heat up so much gear, Tony, that for the longest time when I was using injectable orals regularly, I literally had to microwave every time my vial. I'd have to microwave it every time because it would crystallize. But with solvent is crazy because I got it in pure, a bottle of it, and it literally ate the rubber stopper off. Is ethyl oleate.
Yeah.
It's crazy because I used to mix it in my syringe. I'd pull out like a cc of glucol and that or a painful injectable, and then I would add some more ethyl oleate and I would microwave it just so it would mix and it would help with the pip because it helps with the injections. But man, I tell you what, that stuff can't be good for your body.
That's dissolving the rubber, and then when you inject it, now you're injecting rubber in your body also.
Probably literally melted rubber.
Yeah.
So just for the audience to know, so what could happen if you have these solvents? They might go into your bloodstream. still intact and start to attack what they call cytotoxic, hurt your cells. When they hurt your cells, your immune system will be activated, like after COVID, and your immune system may overreact and then damage you. But what people should check is on your blood test, C-reactive protein at the very least. See if it's above 0.3 in the American metric so that you know if you have some state of chronic inflammation.
Since we're talking about crystallization, there's my microscope and there's my slides. And I'm always looking at stuff under the microscope, including gear. This is testosterone suspension in a couple different preparations, and I'm looking at the crystallization. It's
Tony, you
crazy.
never invite Bostin and I there. I feel left out. You haven't invited us at all. I know Boston's hard to get out of the country, but I'll come.
When the borders open, absolutely. The borders in Thailand have been a nightmare for a while.
Now, Tony, what you're doing over there in this lab in Thailand is completely legal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like reselling gear or anything like that. This is testosterone. Okay, whether or not you're supposed to deal with testosterone, but nobody cares here, right? Nobody cares because nobody's getting hurt. They're focused on other things. And then I've just got a ton of research chemicals, which are not illegal. They're, not for human consumption type thing, right? And I'm actually researching with them and a bunch of nootropics and bodybuilding drugs and all that. But no, it's not illegal. It's not illegal drugs. It's not recreational drugs. It's research.
All right, let's do one last one before we take some other questions. So Giuseppe, I think that's how you say it. He says he's managed to be below 10% body fat this summer and wants to give a strength boost to his juggernaut method of strength training during this winged. I hope that's not Jason Blaha, but I think it's another kind. And he says, I'm staying away from 19 Nors as I will be competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and cannot sacrifice cardio. So you want less water retention, extracellular water retention. So he says the next cycle will be 2.5 units of growth hormone. Well, that's going to affect your cardio a little bit. You're going to have extracellular water. 300 test E, so you're going to have some aromatization, which will affect your cardio a bit. And 500 units of HCG per week. That's not enough. That may keep your balls a little alive. By the way, guys, what keeps the balls alive is not HCG. It's not luteinizing hormone. It's follicle stimulating hormone. That's what grows your balls. And follicle stimulating hormone also agonizes the luteinizing hormone receptor. So you can use folotropin alpha like I do sometimes by itself. Sometimes I don't use HCG just to keep them alive. But anyway, he wanted to throw in some Primo, but he's uncertain on dosage and wants to run 50 milligrams daily for VAR. I hate it when people say VAR, Anavar, for the last 6 weeks. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, about the HCG, it's like when you do the research on HCG versus HMG, it just doesn't make any sense why people are using so much HCG and ignoring HMG. If anything, use HMG and forget the HCG.
If you want to use one thing, but HMG is actually in all studies less effective than recombinant FSH combined with HCG. For not a little bit less effective, but it's more convenient. In Thailand, especially, they don't have recombinant FSH. They have HMG, I think. So for those that don't know, HMG contains both FSH and luteinizing hormone.
So my strategy is I use both. But I understand why some people don't use HMG because it does cost more. With the HCG vial, you use 10% of the vial per injection or 20% of the vial per injection. But with HMG, oftentimes you're injecting the whole vial. And they're similar cost, so it ends up being like 5 times the cost. But for me, like keeping fertility, because I don't know exactly why he's using the HCG other than to maintain fertility and testosterone testicle function. And if so, it's like HMG would do that much better than HCG, even if you used less. But my balls shrink and HCG does bring my balls back. But I know HCG is not necessarily helping my fertility. And it's not going to allow me to rebound as fast post-cycle as if I was using HMG.
Yeah, true. And we should give a shout out to Anabolic Pharmacist from the forum. In the US, they sell recombinant FSH like folotropin alpha pens for like $1,000. Abroad, like in countries that are poorer, like Turkey, the same pharmaceuticals companies will sell them for $150 or less. So it can become affordable if you have the right source. My comment is just that I don't think the Anavar should be daily. Take advantage of it. You can run it longer than 6 weeks and do it 3 times a week. And then about the Primo, for me, if I was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete, which I do know I sometimes consult with them. I would be using Primo as my main compound because it is more erythropoietic than testosterone, somewhat similar to equipoise, doesn't have the psychological effects of equipoise, doesn't cause as much water retention. And I would use that as the base, and I wouldn't be using test. I would be using maybe a little bit higher HCG, maybe with an aromatase inhibitor or FSH. And you can use the growth hormone, but if you really want, and maybe you should include cardarine, for example. That seems like something good to add.
Well, that would be good for what he does, be adding in the GW, yeah.
Very, very valuable.
So if he came to me and he was like, I'm open to other completely different approaches, I would say cardarine, RAD 140, and cycle your carbs. And on the days that you train really hard, those are going to be your higher carb days. And on those days, use MK677, because he's probably using the growth hormone for like recovery. When you're doing this type of like performance-based training, the growth hormone is going to be more about recovery than just muscle size or whatever. So might as well use MK677 on days you have the calories to support the recovery.
I don't know if you know this, Tony, but in our pituitary, we produce 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly, kinds of molecular weights of growth hormone that function differently in the body than the single kind of growth hormone that you get when you inject it. And when you inject growth hormone, I found evidence, your brain stops producing growth hormone acutely for a few hours. So MK sounds like a better option for that reason, but also because MK is basically ghrelin, the hormone that activates when you're fasting, that gives you that energy that you can't sleep the first couple of days. So that's a nervous system energy that could be useful in the combat sport, I think. I think it's a great idea.
When I used to take MK677 before bed, it would be so hard for me to fall asleep. I would have the worst sleep ever.
Exactly.
Literally the worst sleep.